How did Darwin's voice go from sounding like this ... ready for what, to sounding like this ... After 6 months of physiotherapy and learning how to talk again? Well, it turns out he's actually had 5 different voice actors. And you probably didn't even notice. So today, we're gonna go through the entire history of Darwin's voice and find out why they've changed voice actors so many times. Starting with Darwin's first voice actor, Jake Pratt, who only voiced Darwin. For the pilot episode, the pilot was uploaded to YouTube by the creator of Gumball, Ben Bokeh, in 2010. However, it was later removed by Cartoon Network for copyright-related reasons. But you can still find it online. In this pilot episode, we can really see how different the show was originally intended to be, especially when it comes to Darwin. In the pilot episode, he appears in 3D instead of the familiar 2D style, and he doesn't sound anything like how he does in the show. Ready for what? We're used to Darwin having that high-pitched, cheerful voice and silly personality, but in the pilot, he sounded like he was dead inside. It just doesn't feel like the Darwin we all know and love. Although Darwin only speaks a few words in the pilot, the difference in his voice compared to the final version is quite noticeable. The reason for this is because he was voiced by the English actor Jake Pratt. Jake is actually the only British actor to ever voice Darwin. Every other voice actor for him is African American, which ended up becoming a part of Darwin's character in the later seasons. I'll dive more into that when we get to this next voice actor. However, Jake should still get credit for helping bring the show to life. That early version was a big deal for the show's pitch. Because if the pilot had gotten rejected, we might have never gotten to see the amazing world of Gumball, with all of its unique animation, characters, and humor. I couldn't find anything about Jake Pratt voicing Darwin. However, Nicky Jones, who was best known for voicing Chowder, was the voice for Gumball in the pilot and spoke about how he was invited to continue to play Gumball. But he ultimately turned down the offer because he would have had to stay in the UK for 8 months, so we can assume that Jake Pratt also intended to play Darwin. But because of something behind the scenes, he turned down the offer. Since the show was greenlit for 6 seasons, they needed someone to voice Darwin, someone young, funny, and had a great personality, and that's where my boy Kwesi Bosch comes in. He took over Jake's role as the voice of Darwin and stayed with the character until Season 3, Episode 1, titled The Kids. But as the show continued into the later seasons, something pretty natural started to happen. Kwesi's voice began to change. Take a listen to Darwin's voice in Season 1. Who's the power in this fin would bring terrible dishonor upon our dojo, compared to his voice at the end of Season 2. How many videos there are on the internet? Here's just a drop of embarrassment in an ocean of shame. He was first hired to play Darwin while he was a kid. And at the end of Season 2, it was obvious that Kwesi was getting older, which was heavily affecting Darwin's portrayal in the show. It was one of those moments where it was clear that change had to happen, even if no one really wanted it. So Kwesi stepped down as the voice of Darwin behind the scenes. And that probably caused a lot of scramble at Cartoon Network. They didn't just need someone who sounded like Darwin, they needed someone who could be Darwin. Someone who could carry that same energy and soul that Kwesi brought to Darwin. And that is no easy task, especially when fans have already fallen in love with his version of the character, but then they were able to find another kid who was just as passionate as Kwesi, that being Terrell. Ransom Jr. Terrell picked up right where Kwesi left off in the episode The Kids and continued to voice Darwin all the way to Season 5, Episode 12, The Copycat. But Terrell's journey into voice acting started way before that. From a young age, Terrell has always wanted to be an actor. One of the shows that really lit a spark for him was Hannah Montana. Watching Miley Cyrus go from a regular teenager to a full-blown pop star clearly left an impression on him, because later on, he'd actually credit that show as one of the reasons he got into acting. He would also tell his mom that he wanted to pursue acting. And instead of pushing him aside thinking he's crazy and just a kid with a wild imagination, they actually got him an agent and would move to California, where he landed his first big role on Days of Our Lives. That role was a turning point in his career and helped him understand acting at a very young age. But the real game changer would come when he got cast as Darwin Watterson in The Amazing World of Gumball. What made that role so special for Terrell was that he was already a huge fan of the show. And as a kid, he'd go around doing Darwin's voice for fun, quoting lines, and just genuinely loving the character. So when he got the chance to actually become the new voice of Darwin, it must have felt like stepping into a dream. I mean, how many of you have watched a show growing up and thought, I can voice that character? Either way, because he already knew the character so well, the transition was pretty easy. He watched so many episodes and really connected with who Darwin was as a character, making it more than just an acting role. And I think a huge chunk of that can be seen from his performance. Unless you were a hardcore fan, you probably didn't even notice that Darwin's voice was changed. This was his voice before when Kwesi voiced it. How many videos there are on the internet? Here's just a drop of embarrassment in an ocean of shame. And this was Terrell's voice, plus the sentence was, I'm really afraid of your mom. Especially if you're a kid watching it, you definitely just kept enjoying the show without even realizing that Darwin's voice sounded a little bit different. This doesn't mean that Terrell tried to replace Kwesi. That's something to keep in mind. Throughout this video, this is just a thing that they don't have control after. Terrell's voice was a little deeper and a bit less high-pitched than Kwesi's, which gave Darwin a slightly older and more mature feel, while still having that quirky energy that made Darwin such a lovable character in the first place. He didn't try to copy Kwesi's version exactly. He respected it, but added his own touch, and it worked. Terrell's performance was a great example of what happens when someone truly connects with the character they're playing. For him, this wasn't just a job, it was a dream come true. However, like Kwesi, Terrell had to also face reality and couldn't play Darwin forever. This is where Darwin's next voice actor comes in. Donald Hansley Jr. He replaced Terrell as the voice of Darwin in Season 5 and picked up right where he left off in the episode The Copycats and went all the way to Season 6 Episode 10 The Anybody. And speaking of the Copycats, it once again shows just how clever the team behind the amazing world of Gumball really is. Right after Gumball and Darwin confidently declared that they're irreplaceable, they suddenly glitch and their voices shift mid-sentence, going from deep to higher pitched. I couldn't find any interviews where Donald talked about his time playing Darwin, but there's still a good amount we could piece together about his acting career. To give us a look into why he was chosen to play Darwin, Donald's path into voice acting was shaped by his family roots in the industry, which gave him a head start compared to others. He appeared in shows like CW's Containment and YouTube Red's Step Up High Water. He also voiced the character Peter in The Snowy Day, both in the animated movie and the series, showing he had real talent not just on camera, but behind the mic as well. He eventually got the role as Darwin when Terrell had to step down. When Donald took over, he brought a fresh perspective while still preserving the heart and humor that the previous actors had given Darwin. One major reason he landed the role was undoubtedly his singing abilities. In the episode The Matchmaker, Darwin sings a heartfelt song about love. Your smile answers my silence. Green dot your photo on the screen, showing an emotional but outstanding performance from Donald. That could have been another reason why Cartoon Network brought in someone new to play Darwin. We all know that the main reasons is that the original actors were naturally getting older. But when it came time to find the perfect person for the role, they were looking for someone with a very specific skill, someone who could sing, and fortunately for them, Donald fit that role perfectly. However, it still wasn't enough to secure him a long-term spot as Darwin's voice actor. Just one season later, he stepped down after hitting puberty. Noticing a pattern here? Pretty much all of Darwin's voice actors had to step down from the show because they didn't have that youthful voice anymore. As they all grew older, their voices naturally deepened. So once again, Cartoon Network had to find another person to replace Donald. Despite the odds, they somehow managed to find another perfect fit for the role of Darwin, and that was Christian J. Simon. He's the most recent voice actor for Darwin, starting in Season 6, Episode 10, The Anybody. He picks up right where Donald left off, serving as a subtle send-off to Donald while introducing Christian J. Simon as the new voice of Darwin, which again just showed how great the team behind Gumball are with handling these situations. Nothing that we ever felt we had to hide, said nothing lasts forever. I never thought they'd mean us. Christian J. Simon has really showcased his ability to bring Darwin to life, all of his complexity. He's proven himself to be an ideal choice for the role, and it'll be fun to see how he continues to evolve the character in upcoming episodes. or maybe even the amazing world of Gumball movie. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe, and thank you to Thomas Game Docs for the idea.